For a number of years now, the investment community has emphasized on the importance of ensuring that local investors not only invest in the domestic market, but offshore as well. This is a diversification strategy that ensures that you don't invest all your eggs in one basket, in one limited universe, but just as you spread your risk across asset classes, you spread it across geographies as well. Well, to unpack why this is so important and what processes are involved in offshore investment, I'm joined by Harry Scherzer. He is the CEO of Future Forex. Thank you very much, Harry, for joining us. So if one is fortunate enough to have funds to invest, why is investing offshore important? And in the current market environment that we're in, what should the ratio be between local investment versus global?
Hey, Nampumelelo, thanks so much for having me on, and great to chat to you about this. So it doesn't actually matter how bullish you are on the Rand and how bullish you are on South Africa as a whole. As a South African that's able to save, it does make sense to put a significant portion of your wealth into offshore investments. And that's just to keep yourself globally safe against a Rand crash or a Rand not doing as well as we expect. And you asked what proportion you think to put in. I mean, this is up to personal preference, but in my personal view, I think putting around 40 to 60% of your savings in offshore investments ensures that you're hedged against the Rand doing poorly, while you can still hope that the Rand does well and you still benefit if it does so. So I would say 40 to 60% is the mark.
Just illustrate to us around, we know that the Rand is relatively weak against major currencies. Just illustrate to us an example of how holding funds in Rand alone could be detrimental.
Yeah, so what's crazy about it, Nampumelelo, is that it doesn't only have to be what happens within our borders that affects the Rand. So if we look at the US election, for example, if a candidate comes in that the market doesn't appreciate, the first thing that's going to do badly are emerging currencies like the Rand. So not only do you have to feel that the Rand can do better based on what's happening within our country, but you also have to hope that something abroad doesn't happen, which creates a risk off sentiment. I mean, they say when America coughs, South Africa gets a cold. And this is what they're talking about. And so really, by keeping everything in Rands, even if your Rand investment is worth a lot, if the Rand were to, let's say, in an extreme example, depreciate to 30 to 1 against the dollar, suddenly each Rand gets you less dollars and you're still not protected on a global scale.
Yeah. So South Africans have a yearly limit as to what they can transfer offshore for investment purposes. Just tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so each South African, irrespective of how wealthy or how little money you have 11 million Rand to send offshore, which means if you're a billionaire, that doesn't go very far, right? But for most South Africans, that's more than enough. But you have 11 million to send offshore. The first million is part of your single discretionary allowance. That's no approvals needed. You can just send it. It's a travel allowance. And then the remaining 10 million Rand, you have to apply for through SARS, through the South African Revenue Services. And our company, Future Forex, actually does that as a complimentary service, free of charge. But for those individuals wanting to send more than R1 million abroad, you do need to get that approval and explain to the government why you want to send more than R1 million abroad.
To the point that you're making, the actual process of sending money over to another jurisdiction for investment is not straightforward and can be quite costly. What are the best and most cost-efficient ways to do this? And, based on what you were just saying, is it really ever wise as an individual to do this under your own steam?
So South Africa is particularly complex. It's quite unique in that regard. Because of these exchange control limits, it is complicated to send money abroad. And furthermore, the banks don't really help you with it. They allow you to transfer the money, but they'll make you fill in your own BOP forms. They'll make you get your own AIT approval, which is the 10 million Rand approval, and anything else you need, they'll make you do it yourself. So they underservice and, quite frankly, overcharge for sending money abroad, which is why working with a bank directly and trying to do it yourself via a bank isn't the best way of going about it as an individual. I would rather suggest you use a fintech like ourselves to take care of the entire process, start to finish, and reduce the costs in doing so.
And then last thing, not really directly related to the topic at hand, but still related, is what are the tax consequences for people who send money offshore to invest in other jurisdictions?
Yeah, so the way that it works is you get taxed on when the money returns. When you bring money back into the country, if the investment you invested in doubled, let's say, and now you've got double the money coming back in, you will have to be charged capital gains tax on the difference between what went out and what came back in. And what's interesting is because you're holding it in foreign currency, there's also the Forex exchange rate risk on top of, let's say you invest in shares and the shares go up, the dollar might go up as well. But effectively, the way I see it is that if you're making more money, paying more tax isn't the end of the world because it's a proportion of what you've made. So typically it's capital gains. Obviously, there's also income tax if you're, or rather, yeah, it's capital gains on any form of share investment. So it would be typical capital gains tax the same way you would in South Africa, but just on your dollar amount.
Yeah, I like your perspective. That's a nice life problem to have to pay more tax.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Harry, for your time. Harry Scherzer, he's the CEO of Future Forex.